Chapter 204, D.N.A. After the snipers were arrested, the streets went back to its normal routine. Every day a new fiend for the cuisine. Everybody chasing money like it's a new thing. Killing each other like the snipers. We all took the blue pill. Though they were called the DC snipers, they never killed anyone in DC. Though a man was killed on the borderline between DC and Maryland. Everyone they killed was in Maryland and Virginia. That killing on the DC border was only 2 miles from my neighborhood though. They never entered into DC, probably because shooting from the trunk of a car would have more easily been detected in an urban setting. A 1990 box Caprice was too conspicuous in Washington. They might have gotten shot up driving through the wrong neighborhood, or they would have probably gotten pulled over by the beasts. Plenty shootings came from Roadmasters, Crown Vics, and box Caprice. The urban setting had too many factors, too many obstacles and obstructions when shooting long range with a chopper. They would have most likely missed their target or hit a passing car, a street sign, a tree, or a tractor. Urban settings call for close range combat, not fractures. The pigs call box Caprices and Crown Vics war wagons. Plus, one murder from a blue box Caprice would have sent out an alert through the underground channels, and every hood would have been watching for a blue box Caprice. Malvo and Muhammad would have got dumped in that blue box Caprice, slumped in the same trunk that they bust from. Cops would have taped up that blue box Caprice. The day after their arrests and everybody went to the normal urban warfare, a young homie on my block got killed right in front of me. And the following week, my parole officer asked me to come to her office. The FBI wanted my DNA test. My PO was a young girl whose brother was killed by the police in the 90s. So even though she was employed by the justice system, she hated the justice system. She once came to my house for a home check. Usually parole officers would be accompanied by an armed police officer. This time she came by herself. Not only did she inspect the home, but she also inspected my body. She said she needed a urine analysis. I went into the bathroom and she followed me in. I pulled out and she pulled in. I detonated and she swallowed him. The government had already passed a law where they were allowed to take every convict and ex-convict's DNA, and if you refused, they could hold you in contempt of court, meaning they could hold you in jail for as long as they chose. They could hold you in jail until you comply. The DNA would be placed in a database in an effort to solve old homicides and rapes. As I walked into the parole office, my parole officer whispered in my ear, "Be careful. The FBI have you under surveillance." She also told me that I didn't have to comply with the DNA request because they didn't have a court order. With those words, I didn't comply. They would have to get a court order. Damn, they must think they have something on me. I thanked her and left, jumping into my Jaguar that was parked around the corner with a bag of cash and 2 pistols in it. My young homie was in the car waiting. I dropped off the cash to a homie that was opening up a club on 8th Street Northeast. It was my investment for a 50% ownership. I was also supposed to promote the shows and was responsible for bringing the crowds on the weekends. I then headed back uptown. The Jag was clean, the 45 was handy. The Gore-Tex North Face was crispy and the Butter Timbs was creamy. Fuck the FBI. I was feeling good with life. I was living. If they was livid, that was on them. My bread was stacked. V12 Jag, V12 Benz, girlfriend fat. I was chilling. I had finally caught up. Chapter 205, Unregistered Firearm. Me and the young homie stopped at a Jamaican restaurant on U Street on the way back uptown to grab some grub. Some escovitch fish, jerk chicken, and some veggie patties. We were so hungry that we didn't wait to take the food uptown. We immediately dug in. But I had some recurring beefs that weren't fully resolved, so we packed up the food and headed to the car. Kennedy Street was a safer bet for us than being downtown in a high traffic zone. An adversary may stumble up on us slipping and the restaurant gets turned into a slaughterhouse, with them being the ones that slaughtered. Definitely wouldn't have been us. It was a female cop in the restaurant flirting with me. She even offered to pay for the grub. I declined, gave her a few nice words, and kept my distance. She wore the uniform of my enemy, so she could never lay on my mattress, unless I knew her before she chose the uniform and the uniform was chosen as a strategy. We grabbed our food and exited. As soon as we walked out and entered the car, cops came from everywhere. Lights flashing and guns drawn. They demanded that we step out of the car. They claimed we fit the description of suspects in a robbery of some white woman 10 miles away, all the way down Georgetown. They searched the car and found 2 guns, a palm-sized .45 and a 9mm with the glow-in-the-dark sights. The police supposedly had an APB for 2 black males for the robbery. They brought the white lady up to the scene and shined a bright light onto us. She supposedly said, "No, that isn't them." The homie and I were arrested on the gun charges. A straight humble. Straight bullshit. A major fall because I knew that no matter what kind of case I was accused of, innocent or guilty, I would never be immediately released. Every time I was placed in handcuffs, I didn't see society again for at least 5 years. I knew I was about to lay down again. I knew I was about to lose my home, cars, clothes, money, and freedom. I was in society for exactly 365 days. It was the exact day a year prior that I was released from the halfway house. Damn. 1 year of grinding is destroyed with one move. 1 year of weaving to catch a black eye with one punch. 1 year of building is destroyed with the positioning of one wrong stone. The whole structure would collapse and the building would have to start all over. I got charged in federal court as a felon in possession of an unregistered firearm, and the homie was charged in D.C. Superior Court. He was later released, but I was held without bond. I was sent back over to D.C. jail again. This was my 6th time in D.C. jail again. The 6th time entering to the hellhole again. The 6th time delving into the psych home again. It was becoming my second home. And I was accomplishing my biggest fear, to be an old timer in prison. I walked into the cell block and saw a bunch of familiar faces from Lawton, Youngstown, Ohio, Sussex 2, Red Onion, and the Feds. Some were there because they were on writ. They were back in court on appeal, but most were like me. Fought for our freedom and then crashed when we got it. The confusion. In prison, staring out the window at freedom, then get freedom and fight to go back to prison. The lifestyle of a psychopath. Went from fresh boxer drawers to wearing used boxers that many other men wore in the flash of a second. Went from fresh silk sheets and pillowcases to sleeping on dingy sheets that thousands of other men slept on in the flash of a minute. Went from a nice smelling, fine, soft woman sleeping in my bed to a man sleeping on the bunk beneath me, smelling like old shoes and garlic in the flash of an hour. The transition wasn't easy from prison to freedom, but from freedom to prison was 10 times harder. Unless one was struggling and lost and couldn't find their way, then the transition isn't as brutal. But when one has figured his path to a form of prosperity in this capitalistic society, that one becomes joyful and energetic, animated and vibrant, dynamic and passionate, delightful and happy. To lose it all on some fluke bullshit put me back in war mode. I went from happy to angry, smiling to mugging. I went from socializing to being antisocial. Deep introspection was a necessity again. Flashbacks of Lawton Red Onion made self-immolation a reality. My brain was burning and it reflected on my bloodshot eyeballs, thick veins on my temples, and a mean mug meaner than the meanest mug behind these drywalls. I laid on my bunk and began formulating. Pigs took the jag. The house will be foreclosed. The Benz will be repoed. The pistols will be spread out. The cash will be stashed. The clothes would disappear. Staring in the mirror, cursing, asking myself, was it all worth it? Illustrations in my imagination. Immolation was my innovation. 365 days. Though it felt a lot longer, 365 days was embarrassing. Though in that 365 days I had experienced 9/11 and felt the impact of the Pentagon getting hit, I trafficked ecstasy and made hundreds of thousands of dollars. I bought a couple luxury cars, a home, chased all the rats from off of Kennedy Street, crashed a few cars, threw a few guns, got into a few shootouts, and ducked 2 snipers that were killing everything. But now I was back in the Iron House about to start on a new bid. A federal gun case. Why federal? Because of my past indiscretions. I thought about the case and realized that I was charged with felon in possession of an unregistered firearm. They couldn't charge me with possession of a firearm because firearm possession isn't illegal. But they charged me with possession of an unregistered firearm. What does that mean? It means that I was being charged in federal court and facing a minimum 10-year prison sentence for simply not registering my firearm. For simply not filing some paperwork to register my firearm. The gun wasn't illegal. Under the Second Amendment of the US Constitution, everyone had the right to bear arms. And everyone in America was armed. Most had more than one arm. Some had dozens of arms. Guns are sold all over America, sometimes over the counter, so the gun wasn't the problem. I was only facing over a decade in prison for not registering the firearm. That's it. But the problem was, as a convicted felon, I wasn't allowed to register the firearm. The Second Amendment said I had the right to bear arms, but it never said anything about losing your right to bear arms because of a conviction. These quasi-amendments that states and cities had created was unconstitutional and maybe even illegal. How could I register my firearm if I'm not allowed to register my firearm? And then why am I being charged and held in jail for carrying an unregistered firearm that I'm not allowed to register? These laws, like most laws created in America, were created and basically only applied to a subset of the population. This is something I understood. I understood that laws were passed specifically for the purpose of a conviction so black people would lose their rights to vote and their rights to legally register a firearm. I understood that the Constitution got amended a second time after slavery ended for the purpose of every white man in America to possess firearms, for the fear that the ex-enslaved would retaliate and murder every single one of them. They knew they deserved it, hence the amendment to the Constitution. The right of the people, white people, to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I was 31 years old.